Gymnastics is More Than, which is actually a name that Scott here came up with. But this is a place where we talk about all things relating to gymnastics, and the title is Gymnastics is More Than because we talk about everything that gymnastics helps with, in addition to just the flips. So I've got Scott Zimmerman here. He is the Assistant Director of Operations, and we're going to be talking about, some of his history with the company. I've got a lot of questions for you. And actually, when I saw your notes, because you responded this morning to some of the questions I sent yesterday, I was chuckling through a lot of them. So I was looking forward to asking you some of these questions. But as we get started, tell us a little bit of history of your, with this company.
All right. I started out in the summer of 1995, and what's really funny is I had long hair, and Liz was very leery of hiring me because she thought, I don't know if this is the image for Gyminny Kids, and she actually defended me to several different people because she saw that I knew how to interact with kids. And she saw the value in me, and she helped other people see the value in me too.
That's funny. Did she ever say anything about your ponytail when she hired you, or was it kind of like a feeling?
It was kind of a feeling, yeah.
And there were parents that they weren't into the
ponytail? There were a couple of parents that questioned it until they saw how I interacted with the kids.
And that was in 1995. I mean, maybe things were even more conservative back then.
Yeah.
But since I've been with Gyminny Kids, I've never heard anybody say anything about the ponytail.
No, and we've had several coaches since then.
Oh, yeah. Who are some of the other coaches that have ponytails?
Mr. Rodney, Mr. Matt when he first came.
Yeah. That's right. I even forgot that Rodney had a ponytail.
Oh, and you remember at one point you had a mohawk.
Yes, I did. I remember, and I think that Liz was okay with that. And for anybody that's watching, Liz is the founder of this company, Liz and Rob. So we're kind of going back here, which will be fun because, Scott started in 1985. I started in 2003. And so it's going to be fun to go back in history and kind of look at the progression of this company. And more specifically, Scott and I are talking about, being out in the community, being a resource to the community, what we do at as far as satellite activities and how that plays into marketing. And hopefully the things we talk about today can help anybody that is in the gymnastics industry, especially if you're in some sort of management role or if you're an owner or if you're just interested in business or gymnastics in general. So Scott, let's start with your progressions here because you started out as you were Gym Plus and then you went to Red Room Director, but I'll let you take it from the beginning.
Okay, so when I first started teaching full-time at Gyminny Kids, Liz just threw me right into working with the Gym Plus program, and the person who was directing it had to leave to do something else, and I just jumped in and said, I can do that. Mm-hmm. And at the time, we had about 3 different Gym Plus groups of about 8 kids. And this was our middle of the day program. So we were adding value to the middle of the day when a lot of gyms were closed down. Mm-hmm. And so we added daycare and preschool type activities for these children.
And Gym Plus was something that happened even from the beginning years? Because I know they started in 1987. You started about 8 years after that. So pretty much from when you started, Gym Plus was still happening in the middle of the day?
Yeah, so that I think that started maybe a year before I came, and then we just kept expanding it from there.
That's cool. From there, you said that you did, you were the Red Room Director?
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, I was the Red Room Director for a period of time. The person who had the position went on to a different position. And since I was always excited about the different themes, I thought, you know what, this is something I can do. And so I, asked Liz, and she said, great, take it over.
Yeah. And Red Room Director is our preschool program. Our preschool is, we do everything from mommy and me. Now we have classes that start at 9 months that go all the way to, I would say, we try to get them into the school age room by the time they're 6. If they're 7, maybe that's the limit. But with the preschool, did Liz always have the theme? Because I remember it used to be every week for when I first started, at least for a while. But that's a ton of work changing over every single week. So were you doing that when you first started?
Yes, for every single week. And not only that, but we had tons of posters that Miss Crystal from the Oceanside facility was making for us. And so we would have different themes throughout each week, and we had to even switch things over in the middle of the day to accommodate for some of the older classes too.
That's cool. That's awesome. For me, it's fascinating to know kind of like what happened before I got there. You've been with Gyminny, 25 years?
Yeah.
Or 26, something like that. So you've seen so many different generations of people come through, but also just like the transformation of how things evolve at Gyminny Kids. That's one of the reasons I really love Gyminny Kids, and I think I always came back. I took breaks, but I would always come back to Gyminny Kids because of the company culture, but also Liz was always open to change. She was, and if we saw something that needed to be done, I remember going to Liz and she'd be like, okay, well, why don't you, take charge of that? So it was kind of cool where she gave us, our own individual responsibility if we saw kind of like a gap. Let's talk about the satellite program. So there's a lot of history with that. Going out in the community, I'll let you talk about it more, but generally speaking, we like to have a presence at street fairs, schools. We've done everything from halftime shows. In the summer, I know we go to the Del Mar Fair, amongst many other things. But Scott, in your opinion, what's the value in being out in the community? And then, let's start with, tell us a little bit about the progression, where you started in that, and then kind of where it went, because in your responses, you have a lot of good information there.
Well, the biggest thing is I wanted to talk to Liz and Rob about how this thing really got started, because it started before I ever came here. Mm-hmm. And they said when they first started, they went to, it was a street fair called RB Alive, and they were in a field, they brought a table and some information, and that's where they started. And then the next year there was a stage, and we performed with a dance group that was there too, and we were the only two children's facilities in the RB area.
Really? And that was at RB Alive, which is now, I think, the biggest street fair in, Rancho Bernardo for sure, but
yeah, it's one of the bigger ones. Yeah,
I think on their website they say something like 30,000 people come through that day. I mean, that's pretty big.
Yeah, and then that kind of started. It opened the door to going into the schools. They invited us to come in for Mad Mothers Against Drunk Drivers and DARE, which was Dare to Keep Kids Off Drugs. And on both of those, Rob and Liz went in and talked about gymnastics, had people do demonstrations, and talked about the value of sports in gymnastics, keeping kids away from some of the bad influences.
Mm-hmm. See, that's something I had no idea that you guys did. And so they invited Liz and Rob to speak kind of as like guest speakers, saying stay in sports.
I believe that's kind of the facility, the role that they played. Mm-hmm. And then after that, we started offering gymnastics classes as an after-school program. And that was incredible because we got to see kids that we never got to see before.
Yeah.
And the funny thing about that is that, we weren't making any money off of that program, the satellite program, to go out into the schools. And it was incredibly important to Rob and Liz at the time to not only just get us out there so that people could see the value of gymnastics, but providing the value of gymnastics to people who would normally not be able to do that, mm-hmm. financially or for other reasons.
It was at a highly discounted price, but it was also the convenience of them being able to do it at school.
Yeah.
So a lot of these schools, they would do it like on a half day or just when the school was over?
They would do it after the school was over. So whenever there were different times that they would get out for school, we would go in, mm-hmm. set up, and do a gymnastics program, and then the parents would come and pick them up after that.
And I've done quite a few schools with you in the past. I know that there have been some programs where the ratio was a little bit smaller, but we've had some where I want to say it was you, myself, Ellsworth, maybe Gary, and there was like 50 or 60 kids.
Yeah, no, that's exactly true.
We set up, I think what we did is we set up circuits and they would rotate through us. But part of that helped me become creative in my coaching because you only have a couple items. You might have a mat, you might have like a couple props, but you have to make it work with a lot of kids. And there'd be times I think the ratio would probably be like 15 or 20. students per teacher. So for me, it was a growing opportunity to where I was challenged. At first, I can remember being really stressed out about it. But then when if you have a class of 20 and then you come back to here where we typically, it's like 5 to 8, it seems relatively easy. But then you come back with more in your tool belt, right?
No, absolutely. And that's one of the things that I love most about still being a part of the satellite program is taking newer coaches out with me and getting them to understand the value of being able to be in the moment and be able to create something out of very little. Yeah. So because we can't take a big trampoline to these places that we're going, and so we don't have as many mats, but you can still get a lot done, and you can still teach quite a bit with just a minimal amount of equipment.
And it's incredible watching the impact of the satellite program because, speaking firsthand, we've gone through phases where we would invest in other things in the way of marketing. Now, our primary focus isn't on, marketing per se. It's more about finding a win-win where if we're going to be investing into marketing, we might as well be doing something good for the community too. And so being able to go to more schools or donate paper or just be out in the community in general it's in line with our core values, which is give first, and I don't know, talk about your experience with that.
So I think that is actually one of the best things that we've been able to do. And I do appreciate your vision in taking that to a different level with going into the schools and saying, hey, what can we do for you? Because I know that we can provide gymnastics services, but there are other things that we can provide. And that was another thing that Rob and Liz did. They did fun runs, and I remember I would go out and do them. And my wife, who worked with the company for a little bit, she used to make fun of me up on the stage, getting all these kids doing the warm-ups. But I didn't care what I looked like. The kids were having fun. We were being silly. And we were getting them ready to run, and most of these runs were to fund a PE program for the physical educators, and I think that's incredibly important.
Yeah, because these schools and these children are in our community. I mean, my kids go to these schools, and it's important to the company that we support. The people in the industry and the schools that are closest to us, and like you were saying. I did go with you on at least a couple of those fun runs, and you would do the warm up and then be 110%. When I first started working here, I saw you doing a warm up, and I was always impressed by your energy and charisma. And I've worked at 6 or 7 other gyms, and I've never seen anybody with as much charisma as you. And so it was always like, wow, if I work here, I've got to step up my game. So in some instances, it was somewhat intimidating. But I remember you doing a fun run. You did it for 7 minutes. And then you're like, why don't you do on the next one? And I didn't really want to do it. But like you were saying, you're kind of mentoring new coaches. And I did do it. And it was fun, And then I just got out of myself. And I basically copied most of your moves. You do the jumping jacks and the crossing carries and run in place. And I think you would jump and, some of the other things. But it was cool because, 2 things. One, the kids were having fun. I was learning how to be a coach. We were helping the schools in the community. I mean, it's I don't know. It's just a really good feeling to be out there doing all those things at once.
Absolutely. And interacting with kids that you don't get to interact with during the week. That's the most fun thing about this job is it keeps you young. It keeps you jumping. It keeps you alive because kids just bring that out in you. And I love that.
Yeah, absolutely. If I'm having a day, 99% of the time when I go out and coach, I feel much better after I'm done coaching or just doing something where you're serving others. And that's, especially during this time of quarantine, people talk about feeling helpless, like they can't contribute or do anything because they're at their home, and trying to change that perspective from helpless to helpful. And, that's what we're doing now, even still, is we are providing these resources to the local schools. The teachers are sharing these links to their students, but we're also offering our virtual web page and our other things. So just being able to adapt with the times is also cool. And I like hearing and seeing pictures of other people posting, they don't even come to our facility, or maybe they're on the other side of the country. They're now tuning in to some of the services that were offered. I think a lot of this does go back to your roots in doing these satellite programs because it helped us get to the place we're at now. So let's move on to Well, let's talk about some of the connections you made at the school. And I also want to bring up how you DJ. And now that's a part-time job of yours. I know you used to do it more before, but then you also brought that to the schools where you were DJing quite a few events. And this year, you probably DJ'd, I don't want to say this year, but probably in 2019, at least like 5 or 6, right? At the schools, something like that.
Definitely. And so that was the thing. I started DJing weddings and ceremonies, and it was super fun. And I thought, why not bring this aspect to what we do out in the community? Yeah. And so I thought, it's not going to be any sweat off my back to bring the equipment. I just want to be there and make it better, because before they would bring out some of their equipment and it wasn't as good, and people couldn't hear it. So I just thought, I love this. So let's make it more fun, and let's make it more professional, and just make it great for everybody.
Yeah, and he's brought that not only to the schools, but he'll do like our in-house performances. Last year, he was the DJ at Coaches Cup, which is one of our yearly fundraisers, which also goes back to giving back and being out in the community. And we'll talk a little bit more about Coaches Cup in a coming up in an episode that's approaching. But I just wanted to tie that in there and just talk about how Scott's used his many talents to contribute to the community. And that's another thing that I feel like Gyminny Kids has been really good at. Most specifically, Liz, she just cultivates your talents, and she believes in you, and so for me in particular, especially when I was struggling in my 20s, she kept giving me chances, and I would try something at work or it didn't work, and then just kind of keep developing whatever it was, because I think it's one thing about coming to work and you have a job description, but if you can find something that you're passionate about that can contribute to the company as well, it's really cool, because that gives you kind of a platform to develop as a person professionally as well and personally.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's always about adapting to whatever situation you're in.
Yeah.
It's about being able to adapt and be the best self you can be at that moment.
Absolutely. You have some fun stuff here, and these are some of the best quotes that I've ever seen. One of them is, you talk to me about the connection between sports and academics.
Well, here's the thing is I truly believe that unless kids are out there moving and getting all of their energy out, they're going to have a really hard time sitting for periods of time.
Yeah.
And that's why I think it's so important for schools to maintain physical education, and to let these kids get that energy out, and to get them moving, because that's what stimulates the brain. There's so many studies that show us that kids need exercise, and that it helps them not only with their health but with their mental status
and behavioral issues as well.
Absolutely.
And if they don't have an outlet, they're going to be disruptive in the classroom. That's a guarantee. Speaking from experience, we've been cooped up. My kids are going crazy at home. But that is something that I think is important that you brought up, is that PE is not at every school anymore. And so some of the programs that we offer are the only form of activity that these kiddos are getting during the week. So I think that's an important note. Now, you talk about having to make sure that the kids are having fun. They're not going to want to do it. They're not going to be progressing and excelling if they're not having fun. How do you make it fun?
So the biggest way to make it fun for kids is to really realize what level they're on. A 3-year-old's fun is not a 6th grader's fun.
Yeah.
So you have to completely change your mindset every time that you teach a class. And that's one of the things I love most about teaching Gyminny Kids is I can be teaching 2-year-olds 1 hour, and then the very next hour I'm teaching teenagers. Mm-hmm. And you have to just switch and adapt and learn from your past experiences, and to learn from your students what they are really into, and talk to them about it, and keep it fun. It's not just about body shapes. Make those body shapes something that's fun. It's interesting, but also let them be creative in their own space.
Yeah, and you talk about lesson planning. I think this kind of goes to that, and individualizing. So how important is lesson planning beforehand so that you can individualize if you've got a huge range of ability in your class and still make it fun for everybody?
So here's the thing is a lot of times I thought I could just wing this, and then when I got out there, I realized, you know what, I was able to wing it, but I wasn't my best self when I did it. So the more I lesson planned and the more I worked at it, the better I got. Funny thing with that is that when Liz started having me teach toddlers, 2 to 3-year-olds, I had never taught a class like that before. And the kids that came into that class were brand new, and they spent the very first day crying almost the entire time. And I thought, I never want to do this again. This is horrible. And then I thought, well, it's not good because you didn't know what you were doing and you didn't prep. Yeah. And so I decided I'm going to spend the next week prepping for this class. Yeah. Then they only cried for 15 minutes. And then it eventually got better and better. And then I thought, this is important. I have to prep for what I do.
Yeah. And that even shows, over 20 years ago, you had a growth mindset. Because instead of saying, oh, Liz put me on a class I wasn't prepared for, you were just like, you know what? I'm going to take it upon myself to make it better. I think that's definitely important to know because just in general and being a professional in any field, you can take feedback, and progress, or you can make it someone else's fault. But I think that's to me, it makes me feel good because you were doing that over 20 years ago. Where it's kind of like for me, it probably took me at least a good 10 years to start thinking that when I started working here. But, I had to develop as a person, and having somebody like Liz or even you were really patient with me when I first started where I wasn't pulling my weight, but it kind of like, this job molds you. It's kind of like, what is that saying? When you learn, you teach. If you can't do that well, then you teach it, something to that effect. So for me, I was trying to teach it while I was still trying to figure out how to be a responsible adult. So anyway, sorry, kind of a side tangent, but I can relate completely to what you're saying. So tell me a little bit about what lesson plan looks like. Like, how long do you spend doing it? Do you write it down? Do you think, like, you know what I mean? What does that process look like?
So for me, if I write things down, I remember them better. So I definitely write down my lesson plans because it's important for me to do. It also shows me what I've done before and what's working, what's not working, because once I start to write it down, I think, wait a second, that child was having a little bit more of a problem here. I haven't been focusing on that. Mm-hmm. I need to start doing that.
And do you do that like the day before, the hour before, a little bit of both?
You know what? That's the fun thing is that, we're constantly busy, which is wonderful. I like being busy because during this time where we haven't had as much business going on, it does drive you a little bit crazy if you're used to that kind of pace. But I think that you just do it when you can, and then you go back and you look over it and say, wait a second, and you revise it. And that's the most important thing is continue to plan and continue to adjust. Mm-hmm. And like I was saying before, and like you said a lot of times, it's about adapting to the circumstances that are around you.
Yeah. And some of the hardest things that we deal with when we're coaching have to do with behavior because it can take away from the group so much. It can take away from the class. You had learned something from an elementary school teacher on this topic. What did you learn from that teacher?
So I was lucky enough to have an elementary teacher who, if there was a behavioral issue, she would correct the behavioral issue. And then after the correction was made, it was as if nothing had happened after that. It was a beautiful, clean slate. And that's something that I thought was so amazing. And I've tried to keep that throughout what I've done, here is every time there's an issue, some of the kids that have behavioral issues are some of my favorite kids. Yeah. Because, you're able to work with them and they go one direction and you've got to figure out a different way to make them go a different direction. But the thing is that you always just meet them as they're a person that you care about. And once the things happen, let's start all over again.
Let's just move on.
Yeah.
And, I think it's rewarding when you take a student that you struggle with and you see a transformation, a dramatic transformation. That probably is cool to see and feel, right?
Yeah, absolutely. That's one of the most wonderful things about teaching, and one of my favorite things about teaching that I love most, whether it's a toddler or an adult, it's somebody who thinks they can't do something and you getting to that place where they they know they can do it, and you just see them beaming with confidence and pride. And that's something that I love more than anything else about teaching gymnastics.
Because I've seen that a lot, even with my own kids, is when they don't feel like they can do something or they don't have the confidence, they either don't try or they throw a fit or there's behavioral issues. So basically what you're saying is you give them the confidence, do the things they didn't think they can do, and then they feel proud about it.
Yeah,
beaming with pride. That's awesome. Now, let's see here. We were talking about, your, we teach everything from infants to adults, but in particular, because you've been teaching here for over 20 years, you've been able to see, you've been able to teach kiddos that were mommy and me, which were 15 months at the time, all the way up probably through the demo teams in the high school class and go up to high school and our highest levels of recreation before we had team. And then you probably coached with some of them, right? And then they probably had kids that you were able to teach. So just seeing like generations of kids come through must be rewarding as well, right? Seeing lifers is what we call them at Gyminny Kids.
Yeah. And the nice thing is that you get to see them develop over time. And, it's weird because you see the child and then you see the teenager and then you see the adult, and then they start bringing their kids here, and then you see some of those same characteristics in their children, and you're able to relive some of the past, and you get a laugh with the parents about how similar things can be.
Yeah, you see the cycles in like behavioral, probably like positives and places where there's room for improvement in their character, right?
Yeah. Well, and here's the other thing is we hire on a lot of people that we coached in the past, and the nice thing about that is they already know the Gyminny way and the core values that we're trying to portray.
Yeah.
And so some of my favorite students have become coaches here, and it's just incredible to see.
And that's rewarding too. I can speak from experience on that. And that was I think I realized that I wasn't like 18 anymore when I had taught kids and then they were students here. And then, it's amazing experience to be able to teach someone who comes back and teaches. In fact, I talked to Alexis in one of our first episodes, but I taught Alexis and then now she teaches my daughter, and my daughter loves Miss Alexis. So that's really rewarding in itself.
That was one of the students I was referring to.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed teaching her, and it's great to watch the leadership that she's brought to the company too.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Now, you had said that there was one thing that you learned from Liz that you felt like was the most important thing.
So yes, I was in a Saturday morning meeting with her, and Saturday morning meetings were never something that you want to do, especially when you're young, because you've got to get up way earlier in the morning, and you just got to be there, and you're going to get through the day. But
and it takes plans off the table for Friday, and if you don't, then you're going to be hurting on Saturday.
Yeah, exactly. So the funny thing about that is that I was listening, and she said something that impacted me at that very moment. She said a quote that I thought was so wonderful. She said, "Parents don't care how much you know until they know how much you care."
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, that's funny because we all come into coaching at different levels. Some people were high-level gymnasts and are very technical, and they can do things in that way. But it doesn't matter if you were an Olympian teaching gymnastics or whether you had no gymnastics experience at all. Parents aren't going to care about any of that unless they see that you care about their kids.
And, I'm not trying to throw anyone under the bus here, but we've had very high level and even like Olympic coaches work here. And there's been one that was really good in particular. And there was one that I know of that was not. So just because you were a high level coach does not make you a good coach, especially when you're working with a recreational program. Because I remember this one particular coach came in with all these credentials. And so everybody was excited to have him. And then when he realized that there wasn't a team at the time, he's just kind of played with the kids. And then the parents went from wanting to be in his class to not wanting to be in his class because there wasn't enough structure. one thing at Gyminny Kids I think we do well is to balance. We see the importance in learning. Obviously, they come here to learn skills, and I think we do really a darn good job at that. But the other thing is, like you were saying, just to show them that we care. I mean, I hire personality and train the skill. That is probably the most important thing. Some people that don't have a gymnastics background can come here, with a clean slate and learn without preconceived notions that may or may not be correct anyways. So I thought I would throw that out there.
One of the things I like about that quote that I was giving, that Miss Liz gave to us, is it reminds me, as we're circling back to community, a community doesn't know how much doesn't care what you do or where you're at until they know that you care about them.
Yeah.
And RB was a small community at the time, and we grew with the community. And as the community got bigger, we got bigger. And I think it was because of that commitment to our community and to being a part of the schools and to be a part of everyday life.
Yeah, that's such a good point. And, I kind of forgot about that for a second. When I first started working here, none of that on the west side, like Del Sur, was developed. It was like Rancho Bernardo was pretty much, Forest Ranch was being developed. But those that aren't familiar with San Diego, the demographic was, I would say, 60% not built compared to what it is now. We're surrounded on all sides, so we have zip codes on all sides of us, but it wasn't always that way. And I can attest, and I know for sure, that the reason why Gyminny Kids has grown with the community is because of the satellite programs. Because Scott has been out at almost every single school in 92127, 92128, 92129. And if we haven't been there, we've contributed in some way to where we contribute to their live auctions. It's very rare that we'll say no to someone that wants, that requests, a donation from us in the way of like a half day of camp or something like that. Which is also why I think we have so much support during this time of quarantine. We do have the majority of our clients continuing to support us because they want to see us survive. I think they want Gyminny Kids to do great things for the community for another 33 years. And so I feel eternally grateful for the community and our clients. And obviously, Scott, that's a lot of the groundwork that you've laid in the last couple decades.
Well, I appreciate that, but they've done the same thing for me. So I mean, it's a symbiotic relationship, where we both feed off of each other's best attributes, and we get there with the community.
And one thing that we do well, and we talk about this a lot, but it's what we do, is we are focused on developing a well-rounded child. So gymnastics is just one thing that we teach here, but it's not even the most important thing that we teach here. We focus so much on character and character counts and how that correlates with the Poway district, because they also are doing character counts. We implement that into our lesson plans. And I think as a company, with all the different staff we have too, we are so aligned in our efforts. The core values that you mentioned earlier and the Saturday staff meetings, I think that goes to show that, we do everything we can to, be an example for the kids we're teaching, but we care about the kids as a person before we do as an athlete. Because I would say the majority of the kids that come to Gyminny Kids, they do it one day a week. It's, something they do on the side. They may or may not continue it for the long term, but I think that feeling of kind of like family and, belonging and just that positive feeling that kids feel when they come here resonates with them. So, I think it's a combination of things, but it's definitely because of coaches that have been here as long as you have. Because Scott, you've been here with Dave and Gary, and I would say they're the longest standing coaches, right? And then, I think I'm next after that, and there's still even like a 10-year gap, maybe even 15-year gap. But having coaches like yourselves be here, you're a staple, because when new coaches come on, they follow your lead. And then, everything that you've done and you've learned and then you've done in the community, we can learn from you. So, I think that's an important thing to talk about too, is just how one of the first generations, if not the first generations, has continued to teach the next generations. So I just wanted to say that, I appreciate you. I appreciate, the coaches that have been here for so long. And kind of leads me to my next question, is that, you've had a handful of jobs before you worked here. And, you are completely loyal and hardworking. And what is it about this company in particular that, has kept you here so long? I mean, because that's an incredible, amazing thing to be able to be with a company as long as you have.
So I had a lot of different aspirations, growing up, and went to college, got my Bachelor of Science in psychobiology, wanted to go on to psychiatry, and then realized, well, that's not going to happen right away because I need to be able to pay off the student loans, and so I was working with Gyminny, and it was a placeholder for the time being. I just thought I'll be here for a little bit, and I'll continue to get to where I want to go. Then I had other aspirations, and got a paralegal degree, and then was thinking about law school. And then finally, I just kind of smacked myself in the head and said, what are you doing? You love what you do here.
Yeah.
And, you can make it doing this. And after I really realized, you know what? This is really what you're supposed to be doing for your life. I was able to embrace it and, and run with it.
Yeah.
So,
and that's really cool that you found your passion. I, in the same way, had a similar route where I thought I wanted to do something else, but life kept bringing me back here. And I think I was brought back because of people like yourself, you, Gary, Dave, Liz, and Rob, who create a culture where you could tell she cared. I mean, she did the small things. She always had birthday cards. She remembers your pet's name, your family's name. She cares about you as a person first. And so I think, in being, not that there's anything wrong with any of the other jobs or the gyms that I worked at, but it just was never that same. That personal touch did not exist to that extreme. So for me, that's what brought me back here. And having, folks like yourselves that had been here so long too, I was like, you know what, they're doing it and they're doing a good job, and we make a good living here and we make a difference, and for me, I think having a sense of purpose at work is probably the most important thing, like that's what makes me happy. Anytime I feel like I'm doing something that has a bigger purpose, I feel inspired. And also, I love that we can be creative here. And that's something I learned from you too, because it's almost like every time we see you do a warm up, you're really good at coming up with just imaginative play. And not only are you just doing the warm up and going through the motions, you connect some sort of creative imagery with it. And I think that's why when you lead the warm ups, you'll see some of the even youngest kids, they're so engaged with everything you say, which probably sidesteps a lot of the behavioral stuff too, which is something that I learned from you, is that when a kid's misbehaving, then you need to look at yourself as a coach and say, what am I doing wrong here? Because maybe if I was more engaging, maybe if I didn't sit so long during the warm-up, they wouldn't be misbehaving, that kind of thing. And you had said something about, and I don't even know who this is. You say his name, is it Dory? There was someone that you learned how to be.
Oh, so here's the thing.
My handwriting.
No, it was Mr. Doug.
Doug.
I worked up with him in Oceanside, Doug Lerma, and here's the thing: is he was so great at getting on the same level as the kids and being silly, and I did not get that. I knew how to teach. I knew how to interact with kids. But he really took it to another level. And I saw him and I just said, why am I not teaching like that? Why am I not being that animated and that fun with the kids? And I think, part of that is just being a young coach and not knowing how to act like that.
How to do it and be confident enough to do it. Because I think for me, I was like, there's no way. Because I saw you doing an animated warm-up when I first started working here. And I was intimidated in that. I was like, I don't think I could ever do that. So I think it takes a lot of confidence too.
Well, now you're the life of the party when you're teaching the kids.
That's a huge compliment coming from you.
I love it because I remember how you did not want to work with the little kids at all, and
I just said I'm not doing it.
and all of a sudden, you're wearing these costumes and getting into the themes, and you get kids going, and so that's just. That's who we need to be. We need to be that person for these kids.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's true. I mean, when Liz told me, same way she threw you into a class, the same thing happened to me. And I just said, I'm not doing that. And it wasn't really an option. I just, you're doing it. And it took me outside my comfort zone. The first class, like you said, because my mind was, I still wasn't open to it. I didn't lesson plan. I probably didn't do that good of a job. And I think I even had complaints because they were like, the teacher before we had was way better than this guy, Daniel. He doesn't seem like he cares. He's not really into it. And now those parent talk classes are my favorite classes. I mean, we're not supposed to have favorites, and I can find positives in any class I teach, but there's something about being with those youngest, they are babies, and it's something special about making connection with those kids, because I think a lot of parents come in here and they think, oh, my son's 15 months old. What are they really going to do? Like, they're not going to listen. They're not going to do anything. And once we get them in class and lead by your example, being super animated, over the top, show them how much you care, and you just keep that energy throughout the class, the kids want to please you. And I would say 99 out of 100 times the kids will follow along, as long as the parents have an open mind too. But yeah, to your point, I mean, doing that parent taught class actually changed my life in some respects, because before I was way too cool. I was worried about my image. I could not be that silly. And I don't even think that was my true self. I just hadn't had someone believe in me enough to say, hey, you're doing this, and I know you can be good at it, and give it a shot. And, it completely changed my demeanor. People now can't imagine me not dressing up. It's funny, when I hire new people on, I heard there's this story, but someone said something about me not being able to dress up as a kid or something, like I was deprived in that way. And it's just like these kind of weird kind of stories come out, which is not true. I just, I wasn't able to, I think it was a confidence thing. I just wasn't confident enough to be myself. And if anything I've learned at Gyminny Kids, it's to just embrace my weirdness, because I think, the more colorful and true to ourselves we are, the better teachers we're going to be, because we want our students to be the same way. And I think you've seen sometimes the most shy students become the most colorful and also strongest leaders. Have you ever experienced that?
Absolutely. It's funny you're talking about that, and I'm also thinking about one of the founders, Rob.
Oh yeah,
he goes out into the community.
Yeah.
And again, we're talking about the community and how important it is to make a connection with them, and he is out there every day, and everybody notices him. They know who he is, and it's because he cares to let people know, hey, how are you doing today? And he always makes people feel special, and I think it's funny because he's more outwardly doing that, and Liz finds the other little niceties, like the thank you cards and the great things that they both do. It's just I just wanted to throw that out there because everybody seems to know Rob. He could be the mayor.
Rob is the mayor of Rancho Bernardo, and he also, like you were saying, he greets everyone. He's very enthusiastic. But he was one of the best preschool coaches I've ever seen, because he was so silly. I mean, it was almost ridiculous. I'd watch him, like I just remember him, shaking his face and just being kind of like an animated character. He reminds me actually a lot of Walt Disney. If you ever watch footage of Walt Disney kind of behind the scenes directing a movie, how they like shake their face and it's just completely animated. Well, Rob's completely like that. But part of the reason why he kept the kids' attention so well, and he was one of the most requested preschool coaches at the time. But yeah, absolutely. And I'm glad you brought Rob up, because he definitely played a big role in the way that our preschool program has developed into what it is now. We talk about our Red Room. Our Red Room is our preschool program, like I said, but it's considered to be, and I have to toot our horn a little bit, one of the best preschool programs in the nation, not just out of numbers. It depends on the time of the year, but we have up to 1,500 enrollments just in our preschool program alone. It goes back to how, think the core has always been about developing the child, which goes back to lesson plan, because there's a lot of learning that goes on with that. Before it used to change every week. So you're talking about changing the lesson plan probably about 48 weeks during the year, because it is closed 4 weeks. I mean, that's a ton of work, but it's also a lot of learning, and that keeps things from getting stale. So, like you were saying, going out in the community, doing the satellite programs, our preschool programs, character counts, we tie all those things together, and that's why Gyminny Kids stands apart. It just does.
Yeah, and I completely agree with that, and I would also just want to say that I think we have one of the best preschool programs in the nation, and the funny thing is it's when I did it, I was not that great. I did my best, but everybody who came after me,
I have a hard time believing that.
No, but the funny thing is, like, everyone that came after me, they pushed it up a notch, and they continued to raise that bar. And so my wife did that exact same thing.
Alyssa was really good.
Yeah, she would spend hours of her own time coming in and just trying to make it as elaborate and cool as possible, because she thought, what would kids really like?
Yeah.
And that's the thing that I love, is like seeing it get better and better as we go along. And so nice to see people like Miss Alexis doing the exact same thing.
And like you said, I feel like it just keeps getting better. And, we build off each other, and the ideas keep getting better and better. And, like you were saying, we evolve. And that is super exciting. The evolution of the company, I think, is what keeps me excited. Because with any job, you can go through the motions and things feel the same and they start to feel monotonous. But here at Gyminny Kids, you are forced to get out of yourself. If you're feeling a certain way, it's like you have the red room warm up, or you have to get into theme. We're dressing up. Like, you're not having a good day. Well, too bad, because it's not about us. It's about the kids. And for that reason, it's brought me through a whole bunch of personal things, and we've talked about it just developing us as humans. But anyways, I want to thank you so much for coming on today. And I hope that people watching and listening can get a lot out of what Scott was saying. He's got so many years of experience with this. He's brought so much to this company. We didn't really even talk about, all of his contributions. We've talked about his contributions in the way of being out in the community, but he's also evolved as a coach, and then he's been a director of several programs, and now he's an assistant director of the entire company. And in the last 5 years, our company has just expanded tremendously. Our enrollments have doubled since 2015. So doing that in 5 years is a big part because of you and your openness to just help out wherever needed. And also you're very creative, but you're also, when it comes to management, because you and I had to figure out management kind of together too, because that happened back in 2015. And, I think being a good leader, you're very, very consistent. Like if you're having a bad day, I would never know it ever. So I think that speaks to your leadership ability.
Well, that's kind of you. The thing that I've loved working in that position is watching you figure out how to innovate, and then trying to come up with a way to make that happen logistically.
I know. I think that I'm the king of coming up with an idea like 75% of the way, and that last 25%. But that's cool because we have, collectively that's what makes us powerful. It's kind of like where I'm lacking, I can rely on you guys, and vice versa. I mean, we all make our ideas better because it's not about ego. It's just about the kids, and it's about the company and the bigger picture and the vision that we have here. If to end on something, let's see. If you had to list a couple of your guiding principles as it relates to coaching in general, you had said, you want to show the kids how much you care. Are there anything else that stands out to you that you wanted to mention?
I think one of the things that I think is really weird is what I call a coach's curse. Mm-hmm. And the coach's curse is being able to see what's wrong. And that's the very first thought that is popping into your head is you're like, okay, I need to fix this, this, and this.
Yeah.
But coming up with the right way to the coach's challenge and the cure to that curse is figuring out the way to convey that to the child in which they want to make those corrections for you, and in which it's encouraging and it's fun. It can't just be you're doing this wrong and why don't you fix it?
Right.
You like you said, you look inward and say, okay, maybe I need to change something that I'm doing.
Yeah.
But you also have to figure out how to make it fun and silly sometimes, just so they get it, that they're like, oh, this is what I look like when I do that. Yeah. And the more animated you are about doing that, the more that they have fun with it, and they're like, okay, the coach isn't trying to give me a hard time. They're not trying to put me down. They're trying to lift me up. And as long as you can do that, you're going to maintain a good relationship with the kids, and you're going to be a good coach.
And they'll remember you forever.
Yeah, absolutely.
You go somewhere, the kids are, oh, hey, Mr. Scott, how's it going? And what I really enjoy about what we do and what we're talking about today is we're talking about the kids, but this relates to everybody. as an adult too. Taking feedback, giving feedback, and be able to handle that. Well, that's all I have for today. Scott, thank you for joining me. And as I've said before, this is Gyminny Kid's chance to tell our story. So we're hoping that you guys are watching and you get to know our company a little bit better, coming from someone that's been here so long. He's got a ton of knowledge and wisdom and just experience with Gyminny Kids, but also life experience, which is really cool part of this. So with that, I think that's it. Thanks, Scott.
Thank you.